The USB drive arrived with no return address, just Min-jun's name written in Korean characters he hadn't seen in 15 years. When the North Korean defector plugged it into his computer in Seoul, he expected propaganda or threats from Pyongyang. Instead, he saw surveillance footage from inside Camp 22, the prison camp he'd escaped from as a teenager. But the man giving orders to execute prisoners wasn't a stranger. It was his father, who Min-jun thought had died trying to help him escape. Welcome to Vaulted Secrets. Before we dive into this story of impossible family bonds, the price of survival, and the moment when love becomes complicity and unimaginable horror, tell me in the comments, could you forgive a parent who chose their own survival over saving you? And if you believe some family secrets are too dark to ignore, hit that subscribe button. This story will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, forgiveness, and the choices people make to stay alive. Min-jun Park was 32 years old when he learned that everything he believed about his escape from North Korea was a lie. For 15 years, he had lived in Seoul as a successful defector, a software engineer with a South Korean citizenship, a small apartment in Gangnam, and a story that human rights organizations love to tell. The brave teenager who escaped Camp 22 with his father's help, only to watch his father die in the DMZ minefield trying to follow him to freedom. It was a story that had gotten Min-jun asylum, sympathy, and eventually a new identity. It was also completely false. The truth began to unravel on a rainy Tuesday in March 2023. When Min-jun returned from work to find a small package outside his apartment door. No delivery service logo, no tracking number, just his name written in the formal Korean script his father had taught him as a child in the barracks where families lived at Camp 22. Min-jun's hands shook as he opened the package. Inside was a USB drive and a note with 3 words, "From your father." Min-jun hadn't heard those words in 15 years, not since the night his father, senior guard Park Dong-shul, had supposedly helped him escape from the most notorious prison camp in North Korea. The night that, according to Min-jun's asylum application, had ended with his father stepping on a landmine while trying to follow him across the DMZ. But as Min-jun plugged the USB into his laptop, he realized his father hadn't died. He'd gone back to Camp 22, and he'd been promoted. The first video file was dated 6 months earlier. Security camera footage from inside the camp, showing hundreds of prisoners in striped uniforms working in the coal mines. The footage was grainy, black and white, but clear enough to show the systematic brutality that Min-jun remembered from his childhood. The second file was more recent. Color footage from what appeared to be an execution yard. Min-jun recognized the location immediately. It was the same courtyard where public punishments had been carried out when he was a child, where his father had sometimes been required to attend as part of his guard duties. But in this video, his father wasn't attending the execution. He was ordering it. Commander Park Dong-shul stood in a crisp military uniform. His once kind face now hardened by 15 years of absolute power. He was older, grayer, but unmistakably the man who had taught Min-jun to read, who had snuck him extra rations when food was scarce, who had risked everything to help him escape. Or so Min-jun had believed. The third video file was the most disturbing. It showed his father in his office, reviewing prisoner files and personally selecting individuals for special punishment. The man who had once told 8-year-old Min-jun that every human life has value was now deciding which prisoners would be tortured, which would be executed, and which would be sent to the punishment cells where few survived more than a month. But it was the fourth video that destroyed Min-jun completely. The footage showed his father in a meeting with other camp officials, discussing escape attempts. Min-jun heard his father's voice clearly for the first time in 15 years. "My son's escape was useful for propaganda purposes. It allows us to appear more lenient while actually increasing security. We let a few escape to maintain the illusion that it's possible, while ensuring that 99% never make it out alive. Min-jun realized with growing horror that his escape hadn't been the result of his father's love and sacrifice. It had been calculated, planned. His father had used him as a propaganda tool, allowing him to escape to create the illusion that Camp 22 was less secure than it actually was. The final video was a message directly to Min-jun, recorded in his father's private office. Park Dong-shul looked directly into the camera and spoke in the gentle tone Min-jun remembered from childhood. "My son, if you are watching this, it means I have decided to tell you the truth. I did not die helping you escape. I helped you escape because it served the camp's purposes, and then I returned to my duties. Over the past 15 years, I have become one of the most powerful men in North Korea's prison system. I have overseen the deaths of thousands of people. I have ordered executions, torture, and medical experiments. I have become everything we once said we hated." His father paused. And for a moment, Min-jun saw a flicker of the man he remembered. "I want you to know that I think about you every day. I want you to know that I am proud of the life you have built in the South. And I want you to know that I am sending you this video because I need you to make a choice." The video continued, but Min-jun's father's next words made him physically sick. "I am dying, Min-jun. Cancer. The doctors give me 6 months. Before I die, I want to see you again. I want to explain why I made the choices I made. I want to ask for your forgiveness. And I want to offer you something no defector has ever been offered, a chance to come back." Min-jun stared at the screen in disbelief. His father was offering him safe passage back to North Korea, immunity from prosecution, and a position in the government. All he had to do was return for his father's funeral and agree to serve the regime that had held him prisoner for the first 17 years of his life. "You have 2 weeks to decide," his father concluded. "A boat will be waiting at the coordinates I've provided. If you come, you will be safe. If you don't, you will never hear from me again, and I will die knowing that my son chose freedom over family." The video ended with coordinates for a location along the coast near the DMZ, and a date, April 15th, Kim Il-sung's birthday, when security would be focused on celebrations rather than the border. Min-jun sat in his apartment for 3 days, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to comprehend what he had learned. The father he had mourned for 15 years was alive, but he was also responsible for atrocities that Min-jun could barely imagine. The escape that had defined his entire adult life had been orchestrated by the same man who was now personally responsible for ensuring that thousands of other prisoners would never experience freedom. On the 4th day, Min-jun made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He contacted the one person he trusted with impossible secrets, Dr. Sarah Kim, a psychiatrist who specialized in treating North Korean defectors. Dr. Kim had helped Min-jun through his initial trauma counseling when he first arrived in Seoul. She had heard hundreds of defector stories, but nothing had prepared her for what Min-jun showed her on his laptop. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Kim said after watching the videos. "We've never had documented evidence of camp operations at this level. This footage could save thousands of lives if it reaches the international community." "But my father would be executed," Min-jun replied, "and I would be responsible for his death." "Your father is already responsible for thousands of deaths," Dr. Kim pointed out gently. "The question is whether you can live with protecting him, or whether you can live with exposing him." Min-jun spent the next week researching his father's career since his supposed death. What he found was worse than the videos had suggested. Commander Park Dong-shul had become one of North Korea's most innovative prison administrators, developing new forms of psychological torture and implementing efficiency improvements. That had increased the camp's death rate by 40%. But he had also maintained a perfect safety record for guard families, ensuring that no guard's child had been harmed during his tenure. Even in his position as a camp commander, he had protected the children of his subordinates, everyone except the prisoner children who died under his watch every day. The moral complexity was staggering. Min-jun's father was simultaneously a monster and a protective parent, a war criminal and a man who had made sure his son could escape to freedom. As April 15th approached, Min-jun realized he couldn't make this decision alone. He reached out to other defectors, human rights organizations, and even South Korean intelligence. The response was unanimous. The footage was too valuable to keep secret, regardless of the personal cost. But there was another consideration. If Min-jun released the videos without going to North Korea, his father would know that his final attempt at reconciliation had been rejected. He would die alone, knowing that his son had chosen justice over family. If Min-jun went to North Korea for the meeting, he could potentially gather even more evidence, but he would also be putting himself in the hands of a regime that had every reason to use him as a propaganda tool or simply make him disappear. 3 days before the deadline, Min-jun made his choice. He released the videos to the international media, along with a detailed statement about his father's role in Camp 22's operations. Within hours, the footage was on every major news network in the world. The United Nations called for an emergency session on North Korean human rights violations. The footage provided the first clear evidence of systematic executions and torture at the camp level. But Min-jun also did something else. He wrote a letter to his father, addressed to Commander Park Dong-chul at Camp 22, and smuggled it through the same underground network that had delivered the USB drive. The letter was simple. "Father, I cannot forgive what you have become, but I cannot forget what you once were. I hope the world sees this evidence and acts to save the people you cannot save. I hope you understand that choosing justice over family is something you taught me. Even if you forgot it yourself, I will mourn the man you were, and I will fight against the man you became. Your son, Min-jun." 2 weeks later, North Korean state media announced that Commander Park Dong-chul had died of a sudden illness. No mention was made of cancer, but Defector intelligence networks confirmed that he had received Min-jun's letter before his death. The impact of Min-jun's decision rippled far beyond his personal family tragedy. The videos led to the largest international sanctions against North Korea's prison system in history. Several countries severed diplomatic ties until human rights improvements were implemented. The footage was used as evidence in international court proceedings against North Korean officials. But the personal cost was devastating. Min-jun had destroyed the last connection to his father and eliminated any possibility of reconciliation. He had chosen the lives of strangers over his own family bonds. 6 months after his father's death, Min-jun received one final package. Inside was a photograph of himself as a child, standing next to his father outside their quarters at Camp 22. On the back, in his father's handwriting, were the words, "I am proud of the man you became, even though I could not become the man you needed." With the photograph was a key and coordinates to a location in Seoul. When Min-jun followed the coordinates, he found a storage unit that his father had somehow arranged to be rented for 20 years in advance. Inside were thousands of documents detailed records of every prisoner who had died at Camp 22 under his father's command. Their names, ages, families, and the circumstances of their deaths. It was his father's final act, providing the evidence that would ensure the victims were remembered and their families could have some form of closure. Even in his complicity with the system, he had been secretly documenting its crimes. Min-jun realized that his father had been planning this revelation for years. The escape, the videos, even the final confrontation, All of it had been designed to ensure that the truth about Camp 22 would eventually reach the world, even at the cost of his own life and his relationship with his son. The storage unit also contained a final video message. Min-jun, I became a monster so that you could remain human. I documented these crimes so that you could expose them. I chose to stay in hell so that you could live in freedom. I do not ask for your forgiveness, because what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to know that every decision I made after you escaped was designed to ensure that someday someone would be able to tell the world what really happens in places like Camp 22, that someone was always going to be you. Min-jun understood then that his father's entire career as a camp commander had been a form of deep cover resistance. He had risen through the ranks not to gain power, but to gain access to information that could eventually bring down the system from within. His willingness to become complicit in atrocities had been the price of gathering evidence that could save future victims. It didn't make his father's actions less horrific. Thousands of people had still died under his command. But it reframed his motivations in a way that Min-jun could finally understand, if not forgive. Today, Min-jun continues to live in Seoul, working with international human rights organizations to document North Korean prison camp abuses. The evidence his father provided has led to the rescue of hundreds of prisoners and the MOSA, international prosecution of several camp officials. Min-jun never speaks publicly about his father's role in his escape or his final years as a camp commander. The official story remains that senior guard Park Dong-shul died trying to help his son escape. Min-jun allows people to see his father as a hero, because the alternative explaining the heroes and monsters can be the same person is a complexity that most people aren't ready to accept. But every year on the anniversary of his father's death, Min-jun visits the DMZ and leaves 2 flowers, one for the man his father had been, and one for the victims of the man his father became. Sometimes family loyalty means protecting the people you love. Sometimes it means protecting the world from the people you love. And sometimes the hardest choice is realizing that both can be true at the same time. Min-jun learned that love and justice don't always align, that family bonds can survive even the most unthinkable betrayals, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is destroying the person you love most in order to save the people they're hurting. His father had spent 15 years becoming a monster so that Min-jun could remain human. Min-jun spent 1 week becoming his father's destroyer, so that thousands of prisoners could have a chance at survival. In the end, both father and son chose the greater good over their own relationship. Both sacrificed their family bond to serve a higher purpose, and both carried the weight of that choice for the rest of their lives. So I ask you, if someone you loved was responsible for unspeakable cruelties, but had created a way for you to stop them, what would you choose? Family loyalty or justice for their victims? The person they were, or the person they became? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about the impossible choices you've faced, the family members you've had to stand against, or the moments when love and justice pulled you in opposite directions. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Vaulted Secrets. We're here to explore the weight of family secrets, the price of survival, and the impossible choices that define who we become when everything we believe about our loved ones turns out to be wrong. Because sometimes the people who save us are the same people who destroy others. Sometimes love means betrayal. And sometimes the greatest family secret is that there are no secrets. Just truths too painful to acknowledge until we're forced to choose between the people we love and the people they hurt. Thanks for watching, and remember, family loyalty isn't always about protecting each other. Sometimes it's about protecting the world from each other, even when it breaks your heart to do it.